Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. How are we doing? Oh, that's awesome. I'm Manu Agni. I'm student body president here at UC San Diego. And on behalf of the Intersustainability Council, I'm so excited to welcome you to our annual Green Talk series. Co-hosting with me is grad student Pascal Polonik.
Hi everyone, my name is Pascal. I'm a climate science grad student at Scripps Oceanography. I'm excited to be co-emceeing this with Manu today. So thank you all very much for being here. For those of you who don't know, Green Talks is an annual event, kind of a big deal, big event every year where the Intersustainability Council brings in speakers from around the community in order to share their sustainability initiatives and share how they're impacting our community and the planet more generally.
And we're so excited to welcome you back in person for the first time in a long time. As you might know, the Intersustainability Council on campus is kind of a big deal, like Pascal said. They work to catalyze collaboration between students, staff, and faculty, student organizations in particular, and members who help promote sustainability. They also manage internal events on campus, host sustainability workshops, and cool things like this.
All right, so without further ado, we're just going to go ahead and introduce our first speaker. So we're going to start with Bob Hill, who's the Director of Recycling at EDCO Disposal. As director, he establishes an outlet for all the materials processed by the EDCO facilities. So not only does he deal with the blue bins that we're all very familiar with, he also deals with construction material, which includes wood, metal, drywall, etc. And as if that wasn't enough, he also deals with the organic waste that we collect in residential and commercial routes. So with that, please welcome Bob Hill.
Rowdy.
Right. Can you guys hear me? My mic's on now, I take it. Yes. All right, great. Sorry. Well, pretty bright in here. Bob Hill from EDCO Waste and Recycling. Just a little bit about EDCO. EDCO was established here in San Diego back in 1967. It was established by one owner. His name's Ed Burr. Ed recently passed away, but his legacy lives on. So we started with one city. It was a franchise agreement with La Mesa. Now we're up to basically 13 cities of all the jurisdictions throughout San Diego County. We're operating in pretty much every one of them except for basically Oceanside, Carlsbad, and Santee. We have trucks on the road all the time. You probably see EDCO trucks out there. We don't own any landfills, so our goal is to divert as much material as possible. Okay, can you flip the first slide for me, please? Okay, current state of recycling. Basically, this presentation is going to go over a little bit about everything we're doing to divert material away from the landfills. Next slide. Okay, we actually, the number one thing, we started recycling back in like 1989. It was everything you find in your blue recycle bin. The blue bins are out there in front of your houses. They're also on campus. They're in commercial businesses. And the blue recycle bin is everything you put in there. You got your bottles, your cans, your paper, your cardboard. We continue to try to add items to the blue recycle bin as well. We operate two material recovery facilities in San Diego County. We have one in Lemon Grove, and we have another one that is up in Escondido. And between those two facilities, it says 1.7 million pounds of material a day, but it's actually like we're getting close to 2 million pounds of material a day. So we're actually diverting items that used to go to landfill, up to 2 million pounds of that per day, and it goes to our material recovery facilities, which you'll see the one up in the upper corner is the facility in Lemon Grove, and the one in green is our facility in Escondido. Next slide, please. Just like a lot of things. I know you guys are probably all perfect recyclers out there. You never make mistakes, but people do, and you can see the mistakes on the screen here. You see over the bags, we have these screens in our processing facility, and the screens are designed to basically take items and separate those items. So the screens start with big screens at first to pull the cardboard out of the stream, and then we got screens, the screens get smaller, and then we can pull out the newspaper, and then it goes down to mixed paper, and then eventually all your papers removed from the streams, but then you got your hard goods, all your plastics and your PET plastic, number 2 plastic, which is your laundry detergent bottles and the milk jugs. So basically, when you've got a MRF, or material recovery facility, you have these it's like a pyramid. You have to take the biggest items down to the very smallest, which is little pieces of glass, just about that size, even at the very end. But the problem is, there was a bag ban introduced recently in the state of California, but that bag ban it's a terrible bill. It's not working. We pay 10 cents for a bag. Most of you guys can afford 10 cents for a bag because you guys are from UCSD. So 10 cents is no big deal. But the problem is everybody's still buying these bags, and the bags still, even though we have no desire to have these bags in our facilities, because you can see what they do. They wrap around our screens, and it causes problems because it's almost like you think of a drain. When you clog up the drain with a bunch of hair, the stuff is just starts building up. So when it builds up, a lot of that material falls off the back, or it goes to the front, and then it has to go along with our paper. Then we have to have people pulling that material, the stuff that's not supposed to be with the paper has to be removed. So these processing facilities are, by the way, they're the most state-of-the-art processing facilities in the United States right now. The facility in Lemon Grove, it was just retooled, and we opened that facility up here in August, processing 45 to 50 tons per hour of material. And the one at Escondido is about 5 years old now, but it's still top of the line. When I say top of the line, we have optic sort lines, and the optics actually redirect bottles. They identify the item you want. You can program into the system what you want to have that thing search for. So if you say PET plastic, it identifies the PET plastic, and it ejects it onto a line, so you're capturing all the PET plastic that way. But we have 7 of those sorts there. We even have 4 of them specifically for paper. So the smallest pieces of paper, we're capturing it. Next slide, please. Okay. One of the big deals is with the processing of material is you have to have outlets for the material. And the outlets were, for the longest time, everything was pretty much going to China. But then China came along back in 2017 and realized that there's a lot of trash going into their country because people were not putting forth the effort to make the material to a quality that they wanted. So instead of basically demanding better quality, they just shut it down completely. It was called National Gate Sword. It happened in 2017. And so these facilities out there had to do a better job of improving material, because other Asian countries jumped on board and they started buying the material, and they're processing the material as well, but they're taking that material and they're making it into a pulp, and it's eventually making its way back to China, but they're also demanding quality of material. So what we did in our facilities, we already were producing really quality material, but we even took a step further. We slowed down our sort lines. We were used to process at 50 tons in these fancy facilities, 50 tons per hour. We had to slow that down, and we're processing right now about 40 to 42 tons per hour. These facilities were built for 23 people on the line. Now we have 30 people on the line processing. When I say people on the line, they're pulling out the contamination that's not supposed to be going into that paper or into that cardboard or something like that. So we're making it as clean as possible. And the nice thing about it is everybody loves our material because I'm director of marketing as well, so I have to sell that material, and people like it, so that's a good deal. And then the reinvestment. The facility in Lemon Grove, like I said, has just been added, completely new, and we're talking 7 optic sort lines there as well. And what the sort lines for the paper, for instance, an optic sort line that's 8 feet across. And what happens is you got these lights, and the lights identify the paper. They're looking for paper in this case, the paper. And when it identifies the back here, and it's set for a speed to where it hits up here, and then jolts of air timing to it. So the jolts of air, which shoots the paper to the line it's supposed to be on. And then we have people at the other part of that line Q&A the material, making sure, because when it shoots that, sometimes it shoots some of the plastic bags we don't want. Next slide, please. Okay, so here's like I said, to talk about sustainable solutions. We recognize the recycling paradigm is shifting. A lot of the products that we're doing right now are actually staying in the United States. Pretty much all the plastics we're processing staying in the United States. We have established a little bit of outlets in the United States for cardboard, and we also established cardboard outlets for our partners down in Mexico. So we're shipping material places we never shipped before, and it's being utilized throughout California as well. The glass, for instance, we're just talking about glass with these guys over here, is all the glass that goes into the system, it actually gets broken up into pieces, but then it gets shipped off, and it doesn't even really look like glass because there's like, people throw a lot of different things in there. So you got dust and dirt sometimes in with it, but by the time it gets processed through, that glass is not only sorted to perfect cleanliness, it's sorted by color even, because they also have optic sorts that separate that by color, the next end user we send it to. And that's made in new bottles right here in California. Next slide. I better get going a little bit here. So I said 1.8 million tons, almost 2 million pounds, 2 million pounds of material are processed in our blue recycle bins every day. Now we got a construction demolition facility also. That's in Lemon Grove, California. We also have a small one up in San Marcos. The one in Lemon Grove is also a state-of-the-art facility. That facility is processing 1 million pounds of construction demolition debris every single day. When we talk construction demolition debris, we're talking about, we have drywall, lumber, metal, cardboard, and concrete's another one. So for instance, drywall, we ship the drywall up to area in Bakersfield, California. They actually separate the drywall from the paper, and underneath that's nothing but pure gypsum, and that gypsum goes to farmers up in the Grapevine where they can actually introduce it into their soils to soften the soils. So we have that droughts are bad. We want to save as much water as possible, so put it into the soil so the water can penetrate down to the roots. That's one of the stuff. So our drywall is actually making its way all the way up there. That's just one of the items. Next slide. Now, green waste. We have a lot of green waste as well that we take. We have green waste. Every one of our residential customers in the county of San Diego has a green waste bin. And we're shipping over 1.2, 1.3 million pounds of green waste every day to a processing facility to be composted. We never send our green waste into the landfills. Our green waste is composted and made into products that where the composter actually gets the product and he sells it off to farmers. He can sell it off to even residential people. Anybody that wants to purchase his compost, it's available for to purchase. But next slide, this is where it gets a little better even. Right now, we've introduced, you can see the facility up here. We have 2 of these things. There are 2 digesters up there, and they're called anaerobic digesters. And what they're doing with the anaerobic digesters are, we're taking in food and green waste combined. And that food and green waste goes into that facility. First, it has to be cleaned, then it's ground, and then it gets introduced, the clean material gets introduced into our anaerobic digesters. The digesters can process up to 93,000 tons of material annually, 2 of them. And then the other 2 eventually will come on board as the need basically will dictate that. So what happens in anaerobic digestion, if you can throw the next slide up there, please. Next one, I'm sorry. So we send our trucks out there, we pick up the material, we pick up green waste, we pick up the food waste, it's combined together, it's commingled together, and it goes into our facility. The facility takes that material, we clean it, it goes into the digester. Between 17 and 21 days, that material works its way from the front of the digester to the very end of the digester. And as it's doing that, that digester is completely airless. There's no oxygen at all in the digester. And when you remove oxygen from that, microbes start to break that material down. And when they're breaking the material down, they're releasing the methane. So methane's the worst thing from the landfill. We always know about methane's destroying our atmosphere. So we're capturing that methane right up here in Escondido, and we're cleaning the methane, and then the methane's getting pumped back into the grid with SDG&E right now. But we also have a yard right across the street. Most of our trucks run on renewable natural gas. So the plan is for the future is we're going to pump that clean methane into a renewable natural gas storage tanks, and we're going to actually, in the evenings when our trucks come back, we connect them up, and when they come back in the next morning, they're filled back up and ready to hit the road on that with that renewable natural gas. We're also 90% of our fleet on renewable natural gas, so we're trying to keep the environment as clean as possible on our trucks. So that, next slide, please. Oh, sorry, that's it. But just I got 54 seconds left. But what I'm trying to say is we started here with the blue recycle bin. We seen the demand for it. We started slowly but surely, and we're moving our way up. So now we're up to 1.9, 1.8 million pounds of material every day there. Then they start doing studies in landfills, and they look and see what needs to be basically pulled from the landfill. Next was construction debris. We got that out now. We're taking out 1 million pounds of construction debris that used to go in a landfill every day. And then the next thing is, after we started pulling that construction debris out of there, was the organics. And now we're working the organics plan, and we're getting that out of the landfill. And everything that we talked about here is happening right here on this campus as well. We're taking the organics to the digester. Anytime you see construction projects on this campus, that material is going to our facility down in Lemon Grove to be processed. And then, of course, the blue recycling is going to our processing facilities in Lemon Grove or Escondido. And thanks for having me.
Thanks, Bob, for making our waste just a little bit less wasteful. Manu is going to introduce our next speaker, and questions will be at the end.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Carolina Martinez. She serves as the Climate Justice Director at Environmental Health Coalition, where she works together with residents in low-income communities and communities of color throughout our region to advocate for climate and land use policies that respect their priorities, improve their health, and are consistent with our environmental justice principles. Welcome.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? This is exciting. This is my first in-person presentation, and it's so fancy. All the high tech and so organized. I'm so impressed. So thank you for inviting us. My name is Carolina, and let me get the clicker, if I get this right. So Oh, the green button, of course. There you go. So my name is Carolina, and I'm so sad that you can't see the faces because those are our community members telling stories about transportation in San Diego. And I work at Environmental Hope Coalition. I'm the director of the Climate Justice Campaign, and we're working on transportation right now. Environmental Hope Coalition is San Diego's environmental justice organization. We are 42 years old, and we've been very fortunate to be able to organize with communities at the front lines of the climate crisis. So today I'm going to be speaking specifically about our transportation work. Let's see. So just to situate ourselves in what is it like here in San Diego County particularly, greenhouse gas emissions. The main source of greenhouse gas emissions in San Diego is you and I having to drive a vehicle. Transportation is the biggest source. It represents 41% of the greenhouse gas emissions, the gases that are warming up the planet in our region. As you can see right here, most of us are having to drive by ourselves, and low-income communities of color have very unreliable access to transit. So we know that we're having to do this because the transit system doesn't work, right? Do we agree? Do you like the transit system in San Diego? I just kind of want to hear from y'all. Yeah, it's really poor. Oh. And so, but that's not just a San Diego story. It's actually a state of California story. As you could, so let me break down this. Oh, the pointer. Technology. I haven't done this in a very long time. And so the 2019 report at the state of California says that transportation represents, you can't see it here, but close to 40% of the greenhouse gas emissions. If you break that down, passenger vehicles, that's you and I having to drive, 28% of that 40%. That represents 72%. So we need to stop driving. If we really want to address climate in our region, in the state, we just need to have a mechanism to get out of our vehicles. And I gotta say, electric single occupancy vehicles are a solution, but they're not gonna address congestion. And there's many of us that exist now. So we need to stop driving and get on the bus. But the bus needs to work for us, and that's what we need to change. So we're working with low-income communities of color in San Diego, and that is communities in Barrio Logan, in City Heights, in National City, and even across the border. And they've identified their priorities for the transportation system. And here's a video introducing their stories. Let's see if this works.
I couldn't get on time to my appointments
because it's not efficient enough.
Necesitamos más transporte. We need it now.
It takes too long to get anywhere.
So this video introduces what we call our campaign, the 10 Transit Lifelines. And the 10 Transit Lifelines identifies 10 priorities for the San Diego region based in frontline communities that are riding transit on how we could improve the transit system immediately so that we could lower those greenhouse gas emissions, but also connect our communities to jobs. Because one thing I dismissed to mention is that 71% of the jobs in San Diego County are not reachable by transit. So imagine if we deployed 2,000 buses overnight in the region to drive and to connect us every 10 minutes to connect people to jobs. Our communities will flip. The economy would improve overnight. It's something that we could do with buses, right? So that's the intro video. And we launched this campaign last year as part of the regional plan in San Diego was being updated last year. So let me just outline what the 10 Transit Lifelines talks about. Is something that we worked on with different organizations throughout the region too. And as you could tell, these are the 10 priorities, and they're very comprehensive. So we're talking about youth opportunity passes, which are launching on Sunday. It's a huge victory. For 18 and under, it's going to be free starting on Sunday for a pilot. What we're trying to do is to make this permanent and for 24 and under, but it also includes construction of a Blue Line Express. I know that the Blue Line is coming all the way over here, but we need it to move faster from the border into the downtown area. We need a new trolley line that goes along the 805. We also need bathrooms. So that's basic infrastructure that hasn't been invested for many, many decades. We also need anti-displacement strategies to go along with transportation. So these are the 10 transit lifelines, and I will share some videos of the 10 transit lifelines in a minute. So this one is the story of Rowdy and his friend and him wanting to access healthcare. So see how the lack of transit is not just reducing our economic opportunity, but it's also reducing our ability to connect to healthcare. Let's see.
My name is Rowdy Jerome, and I live in City Heights. About 3 weeks ago, a friend was sent to the hospital via ambulance due to his extreme high blood pressure. On the way to the ER, he had had a major stroke. Upon hearing the news, I went into high anxiety mode. I knew I had to get to the ER quickly. Not having transportation, I impulsively jumped on the bus. You know, I had to take a bus to a trolley, and I had to take the trolley to another bus, and then I had to transfer to another bus. It was frustrating, you know, I was frantic. I mean, I was angry. I just was thankful that I was able to get there. We need to improve bus frequencies, period. Because it takes too long to get anywhere.
So that outlines one of our 10 priorities, and that's that we need buses to run every 10 minutes. And like I said, buses is something that allows us to improve the system immediately. We know we have to construct a big network that includes trolleys, new trolley lines, but constructing a trolley line is going to take some time. It's going to require breaking concrete. So we need to deploy strategies that are going to be able to reduce greenhouse gas emissions immediately and also connect folks to opportunity on a fairly quick basis by 2025. So our next priority is the Blue Line. So as you know, as you probably have experienced already, the Blue Line has been extended to here, and that I'm assuming you're enjoying that and appreciating the beauty of being able to connect from school to the downtown in San Diego. However, it has to do with racism, that the Blue Line has not been as prioritized for the South region. And as you could tell, a lot of investment was done north of the 8. And now we're asking for that investment to be equally invested south of downtown to the border so that folks could connect a lot faster from the border to the downtown area in an express service that runs 24 hours. So here's the story of Naomi, that it's also connecting the dots between access to healthcare and the lack of efficient transit.
My name is Naomi. I live in Barrio Logan. When I was 17 years old, I had a very important doctor's appointment to go to in Tijuana. And of course, I needed to take the trolley. And I remember getting to the trolley stop. It was a really hot day, and the times displayed on the trolley station were 30 minutes delayed. But after the 30-minute wait, the trolley got there and it was really, really packed with people. And the next one wasn't until 37 minutes. I had to call the doctor and let them know, and they were not able to reschedule me.
We need a Blue Line Express that operates 24 hours so that people get to their important appointments on time.
And then the last story that I want to share is the Youth Opportunity Pass, and I'm sure that it's something that a lot of the students here could relate to. And as I said, there's a pilot that's launching on Sunday, and that's part of all this work and community-based advocating for youth to have free access to transit. And so on Sunday, the pilot is going to launch, and so it means that all folks that are 18 and under could ride transit for free in all San Diego County. It's a pilot that's going to last about a year, but we're hoping that it will transform into being a permanent policy, and that it's going to cover folks that are 24 and under. And that's going to help us build the case so that we can have transit for everyone by 2030. So here's Denise story. And Denise is actually a student here at UCSD and has been a huge advocate since she was in high school for free transit for youth.
I'm Denise Lopez. I'm 18 years old and I live in City Heights in San Diego. I was walking with my friend to get transportation, but when we got there, we found out that we don't have enough money and we're unable to demonstrate that we are youth. It was starting to rain. We had to cancel the plans because if we do spend the money that we saved up for our books, we won't have any more. It will only be used for transit. To resolve these issues, we have to implement a program for the youth. Something that's simply like a basic need for a human to have. And we all need to have transportation.
So I'm excited to share that as a result of our campaign, we were able to advance all those 10 priorities to put them as part of the regional plan that was adopted last December. So we have a pathway. It's not exactly it. The regional plan is a really broad document, but there's a pathway to include them. And right now what we're working on is a funding mechanism. All of this is going to cost a lot of money, but it's costing us a lot more not to act on climate and not to address the transit issue in the region. And so we're working on a transit measure that has been organized by a coalition of labor, environmental groups, environmental justice, and many other groups that are saying we need to change this and we need to do it now and we need to invest in a transit measure. And so what the transit measure does is, as you can see right here, includes the Blue Line Express. So it's funding for the Purple Line, for dedicated funding for rapid routes, which is what we're saying. It also includes reduced fares for senior students and disabled. And right now we're collecting signatures for it, but let me specify. So 50% of the funding would be used for transit network, 14% for the operations, and nothing for freeway expansion. This is to improve the flow and safety, but not for freeway expansion, which is something that we are completely against. And not so much for administration, but really invested in the network that we need. And so right now what we're working on is collecting signatures. We have up to May 11 to collect 160,000 signatures. In San Diego County, we've been able to collect 131,000 signatures in San Diego County. So we're going to make this and we're going to take it to the voters in November. And I'm here to also invite you, if you're a registered voter in San Diego County, you could sign it. I brought some petitions with me. We're working really hard to make this happen. And we're also setting the tone for work that's happening at the state level. So we know that we are working locally to transform our transit system to connect folks to opportunity. But we're also addressing climate and setting the tone for stuff that needs to happen at the state level. So that's the end of my presentation. I will pass, so let me just explain. If you are gonna sign the petition, I'm gonna pass to and you could sign it. Just make sure that you spell your name. So I sound like the person in front of your grocery store. So I am that person. So do not dismiss those because they're really important. So in order to qualify the signature, you need to be a registered voter, and you need to spell your name very clearly. So it needs to be legible. And then your signature, that doesn't matter. That could be whatever your signature is. But your address needs to be the address that you use to vote. And it needs to be easy to read so that it could qualify. And then your city needs to be spelled out. No abbreviations, and then your zip code. And that's it. And it applies to all San Diego County. So that concludes my presentation, and I appreciate all the signatures I could gather. That's it.
All right, thank you so much, Carolina, for addressing these climate problems and health problems in our region simultaneously. So next, we are going to hear from Lowell Joost. He moved with his family from Cape Town, South Africa to La Jolla about 10 years ago. And he decided to become a visiting student at UC Davis, in my hometown of Davis, lovely little town. And he became, he was involved at the Robert Mondavi Winery in Napa Valley. And so that experience sowed a seed in him of entrepreneurship. And when he looked around and noticed that there were a bunch of local beer places that had growlers and reusable bottles, he decided to start a one-of-a-kind growler-only winery. So without further ado, please welcome Joel to the stage.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I think on behalf of my wife, Anne, and I, we feel very honored that our little sort of mom and pop business is here today. But just to sort of take you on these slides. So this is my wife, Anne, who and I over here. I was fourth generation in the wine business in South Africa, and we came to La Jolla and not sure what we were going to do. We were with our 4 kids. They were all getting educated in different places. And so we started a wine business, and it's sort of come on. Originally, if I just try and go back, we wanted to go with zero waste packaging if possible. But right in the beginning, we bottled some of our wine in normal 750 ml bottles. This is a 1 liter reusable bottle. And we said to people, would you prefer for the same price to have a 750 ml bottle or a 1 liter bottle? But in the 750 ml bottle, we don't have to pay for the packaging. And everybody said they'd rather take that extra glass and a half of wine. So we said for the same price, so our whole business is about reusables. So if I just carry on, if I sort of take you through a journey of what the business involves. Firstly, it's sourcing the grapes. This is up in Napa Valley. You get the beautiful mustard seed in winter, but in between, there are a lot of sort of legumes and whatever planted so that to rejuvenate the soil, and it all gets plowed in. So there's a lot of work on sustainability on that side where we are buying our grapes. The grapes up in, I'd say, in the Napa area, like the Cabernet Sauvignon, it's the most expensive grapes in the country. But really, if you want to make high quality wine, then you have to have good ingredients, and there's no shortcut. So that's really, we have to spend a lot of money on the grapes. This is another thing we do, is we often take the staff up to visit Napa so they can see the backstory of where the wine is produced. We're very fortunate. We have a lady who looks after all our winemaking up there. She has about 6 other clients. And we're probably the smallest. This is Alison over here. She was the fourth lady to be paid to make wine in the US. So she's very highly skilled, and we're so fortunate to have her as a source of the quality that we're able to bring down to La Jolla. So once the wine is matured, we ship the full barrels down to our place in Bird Rock, which is the southern end of La Jolla, very close to the Pacific Beach sort of boundary. Sorry, these are the barrels sort of almost getting ready for shipping. We were climbing them that day, just taking samples. It's always a fun thing to do. But actually, it doesn't all look that fun, because about 2 years after we started in 2014, there was an earthquake, and we lost half our barrels, and all these barrels were lying all over the floor. But anyway, we got over that. Luckily, it happened very early on a Sunday morning, so no one was working there. So this is part of our tasting counter. This is Chris working for us, just filling a growler. So this is over here, this is the tasting counter. And luckily nowadays we allowed some outside seating. Anyway, so we fill the wine directly into the refillable bottles out the barrel. It's a nicer way to have the wine than going through a traditional bottling process, because the wine has less preservative and less filtration. And every time you filter a product, you take out character. Next slide. This is just some of the staff just filling growlers straight out the barrel. And another one, so at any stage, we have more or less an option of 12 different wines to choose from. In order to get the wine out the barrel, if I can call it, I designed some equipment which plugs into the bunghole of a barrel, and we displace the wine in the barrel with a nitrogen carbon dioxide mix, so that no oxygen gets into the airspace, and that means that the balance of the wine that's in the barrel will stay completely fresh, and its integrity won't go down. So through this equipment, we've been through 450 barrels, and we got a patent on the equipment in the US, and then also Spain, Italy, France, and Germany, and we trademarked it as a wine steward. So next step is to start producing this equipment and selling it to other wineries. This is a sort of a next generation of it. Our eldest son is an electrical engineer, so this is a flow meter out of a coffee machine, and these are some electronic stuff he bought. All the hardware is about $25, but every time we open say the faucet at the bottom here, it sends a signal through the Wi-Fi onto an Excel sheet of the exact amount of the pour, and it's about 99.5% accurate. So with using reusable bottles, the sanitation of bottles that comes back is critical. This is a glass washer down here, which has been converted into a bottle washer. So there's spouts that spray into the bottle, and it washes the outside of the bottles. And they get finely rinsed at about 190 degrees, which will kill any bacteria. The bottles are then put on this bottle drying rack. And next step is, before we fill a bottle, we sparge the inside of the bottle with the nitrogen carbon dioxide mix, so that when we fill the bottle, the wine has very little access to oxygen, because it's displacing the inert gas. So a lot of people have asked us, how did you survive through COVID? Well, luckily, we have most of our business is really like a subscription business, where people join our growler club and they get 20% of all wine to go. they get charged automatically at the beginning of the month, and they also get a special deal on a second bottle every month. So this is during the height of COVID, just when we opened, and people could pick up their wine on the sidewalk, and I think they were very happy to have it. And so luckily we had the subscription business continuing through the all the kind of COVID lockdown times, and without that, I think we'd have nothing. Next slide. Okay, so this is how the community come to an example of one regular who comes in his scooter to fetch the fetch his refills. We get people coming, taking their dogs for a walk, and we either halfway stop, or taking their babies down and with their stroller, and they have a glass of wine when they collect the growlers or whatever. Next one is it's a bit kind of dark, but we operate a bit like a wine bar, and so this is just a shot in the evening. Some more of it. We have a small menu, and it keeps changing. And then the other thing is, how do we communicate what we're doing to our customers? This is an example of a study done of greenhouse gas emissions in wine production. But this is where glass production goes. It's about 45% or often more as a percentage of greenhouse gas emissions in the whole wine industry. Of course, bottle shapes and bottle weights vary enormously. Some bottles will weigh maybe 350 grams, some will weigh 1 kilogram, and for the heavy bottles, the percentage of the greenhouse gas emissions will increase enormously. So a heavy bottle is very unfriendly, but from a marketing point of view, a lot of marketing people will say, well, a heavy bottle means the customer will pay more for the wine. But it's a lighter weight bottle will do just as good a job. Next is we have, it's sort of zero waste, so we have a lot of the signage around saying that we're supporting a zero waste lifestyle. Next one is sort of a message like this. Did you know that single-use bottles make up about 50% of wine's greenhouse gas emissions? With so many of the bottles still coming from China, there've been a lot of problems with all the shipping disruptions. So the bottles themselves aren't expensive, but the shipping costs have gone up 2 or 3 times. And so from bottles being fairly inexpensive and arriving just on time, now they've doubled or more in price, and they're not arriving on time. So as a whole wine industry, people are very looking at what alternatives there can be. We've said, our thing is reuse the bottles, and luckily we're under the radar of all these problems up top. But to really reuse bottles on a big scale is pretty impossible at the moment because there's so many different bottle shapes. And a bottling or labeling line needs an identical shape to work on. With every bottle has to be identical. But our concept is very repeatable. Next is, this is a sort of a slide we worked on. We down near the border with Pacific Beach, and if we got all the bottles that one can work out how many bottles we've not used by the volumes we've gone through, and every bottle has a diameter of about 3.5 inches. So if you got all those bottles and stacked them up, next to one another, the line would go to about where we are today, all the way from Bird Rock. So if you kicked over the bottle at the top, it might be like dominoes, coming all the way down. But it's just sort of a visual on people to see how many bottles. I think that's about 50 tons or more of glass. It's probably not much to EDCO, but anyway. And another thing, just looking at this whole thing, it looks cool to do something that's where you saving something that's sustainability friendly, but it also has to be economically friendly. In our wine industry, a standard sort of formula is that if someone buys a bottle of wine at a shop, the winery gets, say, approximately 25% of the retail price, and the other 75% goes to the distributors and the retailer. With our little system, we're selling it all direct, and no one's really paying for the cost of the bottle because it keeps getting reused. So as long as you have enough volume to start off with, the economics do make sense if our concept is repeated and you have enough volume. In putting this presentation together, kind of one thought, what other kind of things has one done in one's life, where there's been sustainability issues, and I thought back of 13 years ago when we were in South Africa, and people wanted to, it was more the Surf Riders Foundation, wanted to make a noise about climate change and the importance of sustainability. So we did this, and there were 103 of us on that wave. And luckily we had perfect conditions that day, and some people got left behind. But and the other fortunate thing is that there were no flags from the shark spotters. But anyway, that's it, and we look forward to the Q&A. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. Our next presenter has spent over the past decade fulfilling a diverse variety of roles in the nonprofit sustainability world, co-founding a cigarette recycling startup in North Carolina, coordinating community outreach for one of the largest no-kill animal shelters in the southeastern United States, and organizing for the Dogwood Alliance to protect forests in the South. Rowdy Keelor is here today to present us with information about the impact of agriculture, industrialized animal agriculture, and its harm on our planet and our environment. Thank you.
All right, warm salutations. Oh, we still got a countdown. Cool. My name's Rowdy. That is my real name. My father gave it to me. I'm from the great state of Ohio. Anybody been to Ohio? All right. See how cool we are? See that enthusiasm? And we educate people all over the country on the impacts of industrialized animal agriculture, otherwise known as factory farming. We are in classrooms in 6 major regions in the United States, including here in San Diego County. And we go in with the best information we can find. We keep it really objective. We don't bring our opinions in there, and we work to illuminate an industry that tries really hard to keep itself hidden. And so, do I have any statistics fans in the audience today? All right. That's normally the response. I saw some hands, though. I'm going to hit you with a lot of numbers and percentages, and maybe you'll remember 5, 10% of it. Who knows what retention rates are these days. But yeah, hopefully you'll have a feeling of what factory farms are doing to our planet. I'm going to focus on the environmental aspects. As was mentioned in my intro, I came to this from an environmental pathway. I was working for nonprofits fighting deforestation in the southern United States, nonprofits fighting Arctic drilling, so on and so forth. And when I started learning about animal agriculture, I was shocked and upset that people weren't talking about it more, especially in the environmental movement. I could not figure out how this wasn't more of a talking point. I think you'll understand why shortly, and you probably already know some of it. So before we get into the environmental impacts, it's important to understand what's called intensive confinement. And this is the practice of keeping thousands, tens of thousands, if we're talking about fishes, sometimes hundreds of thousands of animals rubbing right up against one another. This does play into the environmental impacts when we get there. This is the foundation of the industry of factory farming, is the practice of intensive confinement. And we feel like this is important to shine a light on for health reasons, for animal welfare concerns, for these environmental concerns, and really make sure that people understand this practice first and foremost, because again, it is the cornerstone of this industry, and without understanding intensive confinement, we can't understand factory farms. In California, we passed something called Proposition 12. Anybody heard of that law? No? All right. Well, a lot of you voted for it. Over 60% of you did. And it would ban the most intensive forms of this confinement. It's going to go in front of the Supreme Court soon, and it's not looking great, unfortunately. All right, here come some of the numbers. There are about 8 billion of us on the planet, give or take these days. We raise 10 billion land animals in the United States every single year. So that's more than every human being on the entire planet Earth. That's just the United States, and that doesn't really get into what's happening in our oceans either. And that 47 billion number, that's just kind of a science's best guess, because we don't even measure aquatic animals by number, we measure them by weight. This industry, it could be argued and made a good case for, is the definition of unsustainable, which I'm glad that we're here talking about sustainability today. This number is important too. 99% of these animals are coming from factory farms. We may have access to a farmer's market, to somewhere like Sprouts or Whole Foods, even though a lot of their animal products come from these places as well. We might know a farmer, and so we therefore could partake in that 1%. There are environmental concerns there as well, but for the vast majority of the United States, it is factory farmed animal products all day, every day. That's what's available and affordable, though it's becoming less affordable. All right, maybe you already know some of these things. What makes it so destructive? When we think about 10 land animals, that's where we really get into the issue. The number globally, anybody want to take a guess of the global number of land animals we raise every year? No? How many? All right, way off, but I appreciate you guessing. Sorry, that wasn't nice. 80 billion land animals, 80 billion. So 10 times the human population every single year, and that's where we really get into these issues. They eat mostly corn and soybeans, a lot of which comes from Brazil, a lot of which comes from Ohio. When I go home to Ohio now, places that used to be prairies or marshes or forests are now monocropped fields of corn and soybean as far as the eye can see, the overwhelming majority of which goes to feed factory farms. These crops take a lot of land. So the 10 billion and 80 billion animals themselves, they take the majority of agricultural land. And then part of that is their crops. And so in places like the Amazon rainforest, one of the most biodiverse places on our planet Earth, we're seeing just massive levels of deforestation, and animal agriculture is number 1 or number 2. It kind of fluctuates depending on the year. Cause of this deforestation. This is one of the areas where we get into some overlap with issues of social justice. When we think about animal agriculture, we might think of animal welfare, animal ethics issues, or environmental concerns, but with so many of our environmental issues, it is also a social justice issue. For instance, there are 1 million indigenous people that live in the Amazon basin. And so when Brazil is just leveling these rainforests, that's where they live. That's their home. That's their entire culture, that's their entire existence. And so some leaders have gone as far as to call it a genocide, a word that is not tossed around lightly, usually. Does anybody want to share with me their favorite wild mammal and go back to your days as a kid when you loved animals? Anybody have a favorite wild mammal? What is it? Tigers. Me too. Bengal tigers. Love them. Giraffes, also a ruminant, like cows. I don't know if y'all knew that. Fun fact. Anybody else want to get on this? It's a fun game. Orcas. I just learned that orcas are dolphins. Did y'all know that? They're not actually whales. They're a species of dolphin. I did not know that. I'm giving you a lot of fun facts today. You're welcome. All right, well, back to the reality of the situation is that we have entered what's called the 6th mass extinction. This is the 6th time on our planet where we're experiencing levels of extinction that we currently are. Dozens of species go extinct every single day of plants and animals. A lot of that has to do with the 8 billion humans. A lot of that has to do with the 80 billion land animals. And so when we talk about overpopulation, if we're serious about habitat destruction and biodiversity loss, we're going to have to start talking about those 80 billion land animals. I mean, we don't have to, but if we're serious about it, we might want to. All right, let's keep the trivia and the statistics going, because I guess that's fun. Does anybody know what percentage of water on the planet Earth is fresh, roughly? 3. Very good. Somebody's really good at this. And we have access to about 1% of that, because most of it's locked up in the glaciers. Has anybody seen those signs on the highway where it says severe drought, conserve water? Y'all familiar with those signs sometimes? Let's do one more trivia. I mean, it's probably gonna be a bunch more. What percentage of fresh water do we use in the household versus agriculture in the United States? Something like that. It's like 85% of water we use for agriculture in the United States, and 5% is used in the household. So when they tell us to turn off the water while we brush our teeth or take shorter showers, it's kind of laughable. You know, we have to start looking at agriculture. To look at this water consumption another way, one of the leading causes of water consumption. This also looks at land use and greenhouse gas emissions, and we can see that by far, these are all different types of milk that are available now. Almonds get kind of a bad rap in California. I'm sure you all heard people talking smack about almonds. And sure, they're pretty water intensive. And we see it compared to cow's milk, and just across the board, cow's milk is the most resource intensive. Most of the planet is actually lactose intolerant, and for these two reasons and a few others, this growing awareness of the impacts of cow's milk and more options being available, and the fact that most people can't properly digest it, cow milk sales have been in decline for decades. Meanwhile, oat milk sales the past couple of years are up like 600%. Now, this is an issue that students never think of, so I still get to go in the classroom and I ask students, why is factory farming such a destructive industry? And none of them ever think of what happens to the poop, because none of us live close to a factory farm. So it's not on our radar. I don't know you all, but I'm assuming that most of you don't. And so I'm going to show you what happens to this poop real quickly, and we'll talk about it afterwards. Yeah. If you can hit the captions, that'd be good too.
You're looking at a lake of toxic pig feces and urine, the size of 4 football fields. That's because thousands upon thousands of pigs are inside of these buildings. Their waste falls through slats in the concrete floor, and it's flushed directly into this giant open-air cesspool. How many of these kinds of factories are there? In North Carolina alone, there are over 2,000, and the consequences are disastrous.
The waste falls through the floors. It's flushed out into an open pit, like a cesspool. It's easy for a big hog operation to have as much waste as a medium-sized city. Of course, the pit will fill up, so it has to be emptied, and they're emptied by spraying the liquid waste. If you're familiar with a garden sprayer, they're gigantic versions of that, so they're making droplets, fine mists out of this liquid waste, and that can drift downwind into the neighboring communities.
This is where they spray animal waste on us. This is about 8 feet from my mother's house.
What is it like when the mist is?
It's like, you think it's raining?
Really?
You think it's raining. We don't open the doors of the windows, but the odor still comes in. It takes your breath away.
This is not a partisan issue. We are all opposed.
Right. So it actually rains down this liquefied toxic sludge on these people. It is overwhelmingly low-income communities and communities of color who are having to deal with this. Good data just came out last year that's now linking 10 to 15,000 deaths to this type of air pollution. So it actually becomes a life or death issue for the people that live close to these facilities. And you know, it's something that's not on our radars. And again, it's another example of how this connects with other issues of social justice. If we as humans are serious about climate change, and I'm not entirely sure that we are, but if we are, we're going to also have to start talking about animal agriculture. Yes, we need to reform transportation. I loved that presentation that was given earlier. We got to reform the energy system. It's not one or the other, and animal agriculture is part of that. So this is a conservative global number that says all of animal agriculture is putting out the same amount of greenhouse gas emissions as every plane, train, automobile, shipping container, boat combined. So one of the leading causes of global greenhouse gas emissions. And gosh, I'm in classrooms a lot, and I a lot of times we'll start this slide without this big graphic, and I'll say, all right, students, what are some factors that increase the risk of pandemics? And nobody knows one of them. Didn't we just live through a pandemic? And I just so many of us are not taking these things seriously, whether it's climate change or future pandemics. And essentially what this is getting at is that the the factory farming system is the perfect breeding ground for future pandemics, whether it's because we pump these animals full of antibiotics to keep them alive long enough, and that causes bacteria to mutate, causing things like avian flu, bird flu, that's the same thing, swine flu, MRSA, maybe you've heard of. There was a strain of African swine flu that went through China last year that just decimated the pig population over there. And all that stuff is going to continue to happen if we don't start addressing the way that we are raising the vast majority of our animal products. And so the question comes to us, if we think that individuals have some responsibility to take care of the planet, which I hope that we all do, I assume that's why you're here, and it's not just corporations and governments' responsibilities to do something, what are we willing to do? And so these words, food choices, that could be clothing choices or transportation choices or technology choices. Are we willing to be more conscientious and informed consumers in the name of a healthier planet or not? And where do we draw the line? And it's different for everybody. It's about aligning our values with our consumption, no matter what we're talking about consuming. And whether or not we make any decisions to make changes ourselves, so we advocate for two main individual actions. That's educating others and shifting away from a factory farm-based diet to incredibly powerful actions according to the experts. And so whether or not we decide to do anything, there's already consensus amongst the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, United Nations, University of Oxford. They say 90% less beef and pork, 60% less milk and poultry, and 50% less eggs. Project Drawdown is a team of international scientists. If you haven't heard of them, I would highly recommend checking them out. They regularly update this list of top ways to address the climate crisis, and over and over again, 2 of the top 5 solutions are related to animal agriculture, and that is reducing food waste and shifting the world towards plant-rich diets. You can see it even comes ahead of wind energy, even comes ahead of solar energy. Electric cars aren't even in the top 8, and it really shows us the importance of shifting agriculture on our planet Earth. Now, do you think that all these places are offering fully plant-based options because they care about the planet? No. Why are they doing it? Money. That's all that they care about. Tyson Foods, one of the largest producers of animal products on the entire planet, has launched their own line of plant-based meat. Why do you think they did that? Money. And individuals making different choices. And it's exciting to me because it does show that when millions of people start talking about factory farms and millions of people start making different choices, we see an explosion and things like this happening here. No one is saying these are health foods or this is what an ideal diet looks like. No. But these are choices that we now have that are far less environmentally destructive than their animal-based counterparts, and they're getting pretty good. I don't know if y'all have had any of this stuff yet, but they're starting to figure some stuff out. Omni Pork here is now available in all Sprouts around the country, and people are kind of losing it about that. If you're a student, we offer something called the Advocacy Institute. This is another big part of our programming where we train you to become a leader in the movement. We teach you public speaking skills, writing skills, social media, graphic design, and so forth. That's okay, I don't care about the video. And really, we just want to give people this information. We just want you to have it because we didn't have it when we were your age or students' ages. And that's why we are here, is to educate people and allow them to make more informed choices. So I hope this was of value to you, and I really appreciate y'all having Factory Farming Awareness Coalition here today.
Thank you so much, Rowdy. Okay, at this time, in just a second, we're going to take a 10-minute intermission. While you're at your intermission, I encourage you all to check out our sustainability art competition, which is happening at the Sustainability Resource Center, just outside the entrance of Price Center Theater. Each piece is numbered there, and you have the opportunity to vote for which piece is your favorite. There'll be 2 prizes, one for People's Choice, and one our sustainability critic head will select. The winner of each of those of the sustainability art competition will win a prize of $75 and a bunch of sustainability swag. But voting is only happening during the intermission, and it'll close at the end of our 10-minute intermission period. So I'll see you all back here, voted and refreshed at 6:25. Have a good time. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you got some rest and also voted in our art competition. Our next presenter has held leadership roles in transportation here at UC San Diego, at the University of Washington, up in Seattle, the University of New Mexico, and private industry leaders like Amazon. He's also held industry leadership roles with organizations like the Association for Commuter Transportation, the International Parking and Mobility Institute, and another large host of regional mobility organizations, including here in San Diego. Now he serves as the executive director for auxiliary services at UC San Diego. Part of that portfolio includes overseeing all of the transportation, both parking, transit, roads, and a whole host of sustainable transportation programs here at UC San Diego. Please join me in welcoming Josh Kavanagh.
Thank you, Manu. It's hard to follow Rowdy when electric cars didn't fit anywhere on the chart, but I'm going to do my best here, and we'll go ahead and dive in. So I will confess, I started out in all of this as an electric car skeptic on multiple levels, and I'm going to talk to you about today about how electric cars are going to save the world. Okay, not quite, but they'll be part of the picture at least. So here we go. Why is electricity so important? And one of the criticisms that we hear about for electric vehicles is, the grid is so bloody dirty. All you're doing, you may not have tailpipe emissions, right? But you're belching coal and you're driving your car with coal, and how awful is that for the planet? And yes, that is a reality, that we have a god-awful dirty grid here in the United States, but it's still vitally important, right? And I know our primary focus today is on climate change and this looming disaster that we have, but there are all kinds of other factors associated with sustainability that make it really important that we start to electrify transportation and that we accelerate that. So, for example, here we've got the U.S. Electrical composition. This is what's coming out of or going into our vehicles, coming out of our tailpipes. And that is what we refer to as non-point. Or I should say what's coming out of our tailpipes is non-point. The electrical grid is our point emissions. And so, yes, we've got coal and fossil gas and all kinds of other nasty things that are creating a lot of the electricity in the grid today, but that is being produced at power plants, right? Where it is, one, easier to manage, hopefully not in the middle of a population center. So on the right here, we see a map of our lovely San Diego. And we've got I-5 zipping right through here and 805 over there. And all those bright colors along there, this is from EJ Screen from the EPA. So, and these are from the demographic index, and red is up towards the 100th percentile, and as you drop down towards the grays, you're down around 50th percentile. And the demographic index is a merger of data that speaks to low income and also to minority populations. And so we go back to Carolina's presentation, and why is that so incredibly important from an equity and social justice perspective. So this is where those non-point emissions are happening, right? They're happening in the I-5 corridor. They're happening in the south of 8. They're severely impacting these communities that are uniquely vulnerable because they are impacted in so many other ways, both economically and because of the history of systemic racism here in the United States. So even if we do absolutely nothing, and we can't afford to do absolutely nothing, but even if we do absolutely nothing about the garbage flowing into our electrical grid today, we are better off with electric cars because we avoid some of these environmental justice impacts that are so profound. So, but we're not stuck with the grid we have today. And this is one of the reasons that I am so hot on electric vehicles as a part of the solution. So yes, we may have dirty stuff like coal getting burned and going in to power the grid and ultimately powering our vehicles. But we can get incrementally cleaner, and don't get me started on natural gas. That's not the whole solution here either, but better incrementally better. And, biogas, not so bad. But, again, it's still methane, and it's still just blended into that pipeline with all the other junk that's going through there. And there is biomass, and we could talk about, sort of a closed system in the environment there. And now we get to things like solar, and okay, this is looking a lot better all of a sudden. So what didn't change in the picture over and over, right? Everything that was going into the grid didn't change. But right here, we've got $5 trillion worth of infrastructure that we didn't have to change at all, right? We didn't have to run new pipelines for gas. We didn't have to run new pipelines for hydrogen. We took the infrastructure that we had and we leveraged it. We didn't wait to build out something new. We didn't go to the expense of building out something new. We leveraged the infrastructure that we had, and we cleaned the source that was going into the grid, right? Now let's talk about the fleet. It takes approximately 10 years to turn over the fleet in the United States. This is the consumer fleet that is out there. So if we said we've got about 290 million vehicles in the consumer fleet in the US. So if we said, okay, we're going to change everything today, it would take 9 years, even if all that infrastructure and we could pipe sunlight right into our gas tanks, right? It would take 10 years to change out the fleet so that we actually had cars that ran on sunlight. So, whereas if we have electric cars and we can clean everything going into the grid, right, we get to reap the benefit of that immediately, right? And so 261 million vehicles get cleaner faster. So, and they get cleaner incrementally at every step along the way, back to the incrementally cleaner inputs that we have. So this is one of the light bulbs that came on for me when I moved to San Diego, because as Manu touched on, I've bounced around here to there, and I have never lived someplace like San Diego. I love it, but here in the land of canyons and cul-de-sacs, things are a little bit different. And one of the things that's been really interesting for me is coming and living, and I feel fortunate I get to live here in University City. And the housing stock in University City, I've watched this one go up during my commute for the last couple of years, is predominantly multifamily housing. And yay, multifamily housing, I'm all about the density, that's fantastic. But I have the luxury, I've had the luxury in my life of living in a single family home. If I buy an electric vehicle, I'm gonna plug it in. I can plug it into the 110 in my garage, and it's gonna charge very, very slowly overnight. Or if I needed something a little bit faster, I'll call my cousin, the electrician, and he'll come over. I did this one time. And we'll put in 220, and we'll be able to charge a bunch faster than that. But if you live in multifamily housing, that's not an option, right? If you're trying to, if you're fortunate enough you own your home and you're in a condo, have you ever gone to a condo board meeting? It is not a happy place, right? And so trying to get all those folks to come along to put in EV chargers in your condominium complex, it ain't gonna happen. Or at least it's not gonna happen very efficiently. And what about the folks that rent? Right, and we've got a large portion of the folks around the university, not hard to imagine why, that are renting right now. Or even as we go further out into the community, we understand how bad the housing crisis is these days. Home ownership is unattainable for many folks. And so they are going to be renting. So we have a need to have a public charging infrastructure that looks away from home-based charging. And this is where our lovely University of California at San Diego comes in, right? And this was an aha moment for me. I'm gonna freely confess, I came up in the transportation industry on the parking side of the house, about as dirty as you can get it. And thank you for not throwing, no, we don't want food waste, so you wouldn't throw tomatoes. But in all seriousness, came up through the parking side of the house. And the one thing I said as electric vehicles were starting to come online is, why on earth would I want to put in charging stations in my parking garage? I am not in the gas station business, right? People have got to get somewhere. They need to park when they get there. That's my job. I'll take care of it. No problem. Got it. And as I had an evolution of thinking, right? And as I came to San Diego and I came to understand the challenge that we have with multifamily housing, I was like, Yeah, we have a responsibility here. There is a role for us to play. And so here's our campus map. On this side, we've got our DC fast charging network. On this side, we've got our level 2 network for the campus. We actually have here at UC San Diego, and I'm fortunate enough to be standing on the shoulders of giants, frankly, the largest campus charging program in the US, the most diverse campus charging program in the US. And we're going to talk a little bit about how we're going to stay well ahead of the curve with that. So, but our strategy is to ring the campus with DC fast chargers, right? Okay, why are we ringing the campus with DC fast chargers? Let's think about behavior here, right, in behavior. So a DC fast charger at the end of the edge of the campus is going to intercept somebody as they're coming into the university, perhaps in the morning. It's going to pick them up on their way home. But what about all of the other times? At the edge of the campus, as we electrify the TNC fleet, the Lyfts and the Ubers that are out there, we don't want them circulating to the interior of the campus to charge during the day, but we would love for them to be utilizing that infrastructure so it's not sitting idle during the day. We'll put that at the edge of the campus, right? So we don't have the traffic impacts on the campus, and we have a nice, safe, welcoming environment for bicycles and pedestrians on the campus. So then our level 2s, right, again, following human behavior here. Why swim upstream when you can swim with the current? Our level 2s are our all-day charging option, and historically this was 4-hour charging on the campus, which was really obnoxious. You'd plug in, but if you're not just going to class, if you're here for the whole day, you got to go out and move your car in the middle of the day, or you're going to get a ticket. Oh, those parking people, they're awful. Anyhow. So our level 2 charging throughout the core of the campus and is proximate to where people want to go to end their trip and leave their vehicle for the course of the day. So destination adjacent. So, but we need to evolve beyond that. And so here is our current charging framework on the campus. And this EV14 and 12 is actually going to be rolling out as a communication program and as a way of structuring the EV charging program on campus over the next couple of months. And so metaphorically, that EV1 is the pit stop. These are our DC fast chargers. They're anywhere from 50 to 150 kilowatts. And you can get in, you can charge up your vehicle in 15, 20 minutes maximum, have a cup of coffee while you're doing it, sit there and check your email or play Angry Birds or whatever it is you do, and it'll all be good. Our EV4s are really leveraging our legacy charging stock on the campus, right? All those EVSEs or charger heads that we've purchased over time that demand a certain level of electricity coming into them. But this is where it gets really exciting. PowerFlex is a company that we helped incubate here on the campus and grow. And they use something called adaptive load management, right? And so we've all heard a lot over the last 2 years about flattening the curve. And this is flattening the curve in terms of demand for electricity. And so whereas with the historic level 2 charger, the asset wasn't going to be utilized. You could charge your battery up. It was going to take 2 to 4 hours. And after that, if the car was still there was somebody else that couldn't charge, right? With adaptive load management, we're able to plug in all the cars at once as they arrive and intelligently direct the electricity. And the electricity goes to the cars that need it based on the state of charge for the car, based on how full somebody wants their battery to be before they leave, based on the number of cars that are plugged in at that moment in time, and the time that the person is going to leave. And it gets even better than that, because we're just getting started with that. Because the grid is flush with renewables in the middle of the day, right? 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., we get sort of the sunlight peak and the most solar coming in. So what if all these commuters that are showing up at 8, 9 o'clock in the morning and staying until 5, 6 o'clock in the evening, we were able to maximize the electrons flowing into those batteries between 10 and 2. Now, all of a sudden, we've done something really great, because now we're not relying on the base load of fossil fuels that are going into the grid, but instead we're putting in the cleanest possible electricity. So, but as we heard earlier, electric cars, good, but they're still creating congestion. There's still an inefficient use of our infrastructure overall as a transportation system. We need to do better, and that's where electric transit comes in. This is a rendering of the Void Electric Mobility Hub. This is a project that we have been working on here at UC San Diego, and with the kindness of U.S. Department of Transportation, hopefully we are going to be able to start construction on this coming spring. So we've got a $25 million ask out to US DOT for a RAISE grant that will help us build this hub. And so what are we going to do with it here? Today we have about 300 level 2 charging stations on the campus. We're going to add another 400 at a single facility, every one of them with adaptive load management, where you can leave a vehicle all day long and with the greenest possible charging, a total of 130% increase in the publicly available L2 charging on the campus. We're going to be introducing public EV car sharing, one-way car sharing, no membership required, rates that are comparable to renting a spin scooter, right, in terms of the per minute cost for EV car sharing. And then for our university fleet, we're going to be introducing shared electric vehicles that help decongest the core of the campus. We don't get vehicles assigned out to departments. Instead, an employee coming in can pick up a vehicle that they're going to need for the day if they're going to need it. Again, not in the heart of the campus, and we're not getting those vehicles permanently assigned out, which induces demand for travel. So, but we're not stopping there with the private automobiles. We get new shared e-bike and scooter facilities. We get 200 new bike parking stalls that are in heightened security. We get personal effects storage in there. We get cameras. We get access control at those. We also get another 1.25 miles of Class 4 buffered and delineated bikeways on the campus. And the map that you see here is our existing in the gray, are committed as part of the VoIP Transit or Electric Mobility Hub in the dark green there, and this dashed green, which I'm particularly enamored of running up Gilman Drive here, is in planning right now to actually run a Class 4 bikeway on Gilman Drive through the center of the campus. So, but wait, there's more. I feel like Ron Popeil up here. So we'll introduce depot charging for 24 electric transit buses. By the way, the first 6 are on order right now. Electric buses coming to UC San Diego finally. It's about time. Parking for an additional 16 electric shuttles, our whole microtransit fleet of electricity. The goal, fully electrify Triton Transit, our in-house transit operation by 2030. We add shared on-street 450 kilowatt charging for us to share with MTS, to share with IPPS, who's doing a wonderful thing here on campus in terms of their carbon neutral last mile initiative. And we create a permanent facility for our student driver team here on campus for licensing, training, and an operations base. So this is the Void Electric Mobility Hub. I encourage you to check it out on our website. I will stay on the right side of the line in terms of advocacy here. And if you do wish to advocate for this, you'll find information out there probably about how to do it, and I certainly welcome your support. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Josh. We've been in a lot of meetings together, me and Manu over the years, talking about sustainable transportation. I can personally say Josh definitely advocates for improvements on our campus. We now have our last speaker, Amy Lerner. She received her PhD in geography in 2011 from our neighbors up the coast, UC Santa Barbara. And she has extensive teaching experience in everything from Latin American geography to urban ecology in New York City. Her research focuses on a variety of topics, including landscape change, city planning, green infrastructure, urban agriculture, and just a variety of things to do with the science policy interface. So please welcome Amy Lerner.
Oh, thank you. Can you hear me? Does that work? Yes. Hi, good afternoon. It's hard to follow Josh because Josh is very popular. A lot of students miss my classes because they say they're looking for parking, and I just send them to him. And it's no longer an excuse. By the way, I've been told there's plenty of parking on campus, so just ask Josh. Good afternoon, evening. It's fun to be here. I'm usually at home with a small child who almost came as well to this presentation. It's fun to be here with you guys. This is not, well, if there's some people taking classes with me right now, right? How's the midterm? Everything going okay? Yeah, all right. I've got 300 students this quarter. It's been fun, and a lot of these reflections have to do with what we've been talking about in my classes, so you'll find this very familiar, or especially if you're in my ESIS 103 class. So this is not really a research talk. I mean, I'm a faculty member. I've been in research for a long time and teaching. This is really a personal talk about my reflections given the kinds of heaviness that we're dealing with all the time with our socio-environmental crises. I've been dealing with this heaviness for a long time, basically since I was a teenager. That's been a very long time. So I've just been faced with different ways of trying to grapple with this. And I've talked to students about this in my classes. I say, can you talk more about climate anxiety and eco-anxiety? Because it's weighing really heavy on us. And it weighs heavy on me too. So I'm just gonna offer some thoughts about it. Did I just do something? Oh, no, that's my slide. Okay, so we're confronted with these kinds of disasters all the time. It's really heavy to see. It actually weighs on us. Does anyone here feel the heaviness and the weight of what we're seeing all the time in the news? We see images. It's like I don't even want to teach about climate change anymore. It feels like it's too much for me, for students. It's become quite a burden to be thinking about. Our ecosystems collapsing, places that you've seen in your life that you may not ever see again. And I think it's completely normal to feel this way, and actually we need to share that feeling because it is a real feeling, especially in the West, dealing with drought, seeing Lake Mead's at the lowest point it's ever been, right? And if you're paying attention in the news, you really want to turn away. And that makes sense. And I actually spend a lot of time turning away, and I'll tell you what I do when I turn away in a few minutes. We see these graphics, right? And one of the problems with science, with climate change, and this is one of the things that I've actually been discovering over time since I've moved from the biophysical sciences, from being a biology major as an undergrad to being a social scientist, is that the science, which is needed and really important, actually makes it kind of harder to grapple with the problem because it's a science issue that's framed by science, and we're digesting the science, and we're digesting these kinds of graphics. This just came out. This is the IPCC graph of our different trajectories and how to limit. And these graphics are hard for us to digest. You know, this is like brain stuff. And it's really a heart issue, right? So we're using our brains to try and figure out all this science and work with the science and respond to the science to something that's so deeply human. And that's part of the reason that we face this heaviness, right? Because we're not really able to emotionally connect with this issue that's been framed by science for a really long time. And all of our environmental problems have been framed by science. And I'm not saying that I don't love science, but I think we have to really be grappling with our human selves with these issues. That's what is most important. So if you've had class with me, you've seen this. And this is a quote that when I saw around 10 years ago, it just hit me. It encapsulates my experiences over the last 25 years working in environmental issues. I used to think the top environmental problems were biodiversity loss, ecosystem collapse, and climate change. I thought that with 30 years of good science, we could address these problems, but I was wrong. The top environmental problems are selfishness, greed, and apathy, and to deal with those, we need a spiritual and cultural transformation. And we scientists don't know how to do that. And that's the founder of the NRDC, Gus Speth, reflecting also in the same kind of position that I'm in and many of us find ourselves in, that we need a spiritual and cultural transformation. We don't have that kind of training. We're scientists working on science issues, on physical issues. How do we connect with our spiritual selves? And even in our university spaces, I think that this is increasingly difficult, right? Students tell me all the time, I'm tired of competing with my peers. I don't want to be competing. I want to be collaborating. Can't we do things collaboratively? Can't we be connected more? It's this spiritual cultural transformation that I think universities actually need to be fueling, and a lot of them are, and we have spaces like this and all other kinds of spaces. But this is, I think, fundamentally why climate change has entered the therapy room, right? We haven't been bringing our human selves to such human issues. We have now new terms, eco-anxiety. We have solastalgia or solastasia, which is like nostalgia, but for our ecosystems and our environment, the feeling of loss of our environment. So the nostalgia that we would be feeling, but for places like the Great Barrier Reef, which I saw in the 90s, and it's probably not even there anymore. It's bleached, the part of the coral reef that I went to, right? And this is an actual psychological feeling. We have handbooks on how to deal with climate anxiety, including this one from Sarah Jacquette Ray, which I've talked about a bit in my class this quarter. It's a field guide. It's framed for students. She's a professor in the Cal State system who wrote this for her students because she realized that we need help. We need help grappling with this heaviness that we're all feeling. This is one of the visuals from the book, which I think is really helpful, that we start with idealism and it moves into lost innocence, to guilt, to nihilism. And I've been there in that phase. I mean, I have been everywhere that you could imagine in terms of diets. I have been all forms of vegan, raw food, vegan, fruitarian, vegetarian, carne eating, whatever, all things, moving into self-care, rediscovering pleasure, hope, efficacy, and then ending with resilience. And this is where we all want to be. And I found this really helpful because she's actually describing paths that I've taken, and they can be just cycles in our lives. And understanding that, again, our emotional selves are such a fundamental part of this. And the wisdom and understanding our ability to address climate change with our emotional selves. And that connection is really fundamental. So just the last piece is what has kept me going more than anything else, which is soil. And if you haven't touched soil today, I recommend that you do. I am going to be the advocate forever of more places for students to contact soil and cultivate soil on campus. That is like what I've decided is going to be my mission. I have tenure, I can do it. So soil, and I'm like on the committees, I'm on the open space committee, I'm on the campus environment committee, I'm all there talking about how to get more spaces for students to connect with the soil. I've heard a statistic, Jasmine told me, 100 grad students on the wait list for their community garden, 100. So, I mean, it's not like parking, but a lot of people want a garden on campus. And there's a reason why, and it's because this is one of the fundamental ways to connect to ourselves and connect to the environment. So I'm not, going to say anything that a lot of us don't already know, but I could just show us a lot of inspiring pictures and how cultivating food for me, and this, I really found this love when I was in college, changed my life. And my family actually has a farm now in San Diego County, and I grow food for my family and my neighbors and people in my department, and if you catch me on a good day, I'll throw oranges at you. And this is really what has empowered me more than anything, is growing my own food and really knowing how to do it and teaching others how to do it, and feeling like I can take control, because part of this, anxiety is the loss of control, taking control of my own life, my own system, my seeds, my food sources, and I really underestimated the power that it would give me, but it's something that has been carrying me for a really long time. I think our campuses are really important places for that. We have great gardens all over campus, including Rogers Community Garden. I can't see you, Jasmine. I'm assuming you're still there. So if you want to know more about it, Jasmine is here, right? Yep, student representative of Rogers. And not only just growing food, but cultivating native, non-native, wild landscapes are part of this as well. Cultivating on our balconies, on our windowsills, being able to connect to plants, to soil, our food sources is one of these ways I think that we can best cope with the heaviness and anxieties in our lives, especially seed sharing, seed communities. I put this here because campus planners are doing some amazing work on campus and finding nooks and places to be in natural environments. I think sometimes students take for granted these nooks on campus. There are places all over campus to be closer to people, farther away from people, connected to nature in different ways. And we should be cultivating that because it is heavy, and it is actually proven over and over again that working with soil, working with plants, being stewards of our environment with our environment actually reduces stress and is better for our mental health, especially on college campuses. There's actually I might pivot my research because there's so little research done on college campuses and the potential that college campuses have for bettering student health through environmental stewardship on campus. So I'm just gonna close with one of my favorite garden advocates in the world, Ron Finley in LA, and he's been at this for a long time, and his byline is plant some shit, and he's amazing, and so that's what I say to you, plant some shit. And Sherry Mitchell, who is also an amazing Indigenous environmental lawyer and activist, and we read this in my class, and so I've just been like mulling it over because it's a really powerful piece. And she says, seeing the world through an Indigenous lens requires one to take a world-centered view that recognizes the relationships that exist among all living systems and the many ways that these systems are constantly moving toward harmony and balance. Unfortunately, a great deal of critical Indigenous knowledge has remained outside the carefully ordered categorization of Western thought, making its holistic concepts difficult to comprehend for those who have been trained to see the world in fractured pieces. And universities are guilty of this, fracturing disciplines, departments, etc. It is this fractured view that has been central to the fracturing of our societies and environment. So the call is to respond to this fracturing by having more holistic, traditional, Indigenous, environmental knowledge in our lives, and to demand also that the university provide these kinds of spaces, which it's already doing, and there could be more. And I'm happy to be that advocate as well. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Amy. I've never taken any of her classes, but I sure wish I had after that. So with that, we just want to thank all of the speakers again. They're all up here. Let's just give them another round of applause before we move into questions. So I think the way this is going to work, the prizes will be at the end, but this is your opportunity to ask questions of all the speakers, and I think I'll just run around and hand the mic to whoever wants to ask a question.
So we'd like to invite all of our speakers back up to the stage for a brief Q&A. For the audience, feel free to participate if you'd like, or listen if you don't want to. Pascal will be down. Just raise your hand, and he'll come and bring the mic to you in the order the hands go up. And we'll have an opportunity about 10 minutes to ask any of our most burning, or should I say not burning, fossil fuels probably, questions to, sorry, bad pun, to our wonderful panelists. So if you'd like to ask a question, you can raise your hand, and Pascal will bring you the microphone. So convenient.
Questions? Should I start? Maybe I'll get us started with one while you all are thinking. I guess we're at a university here, and I'm curious just to hear if anybody has thoughts about what you think the role of in some cases, Josh, you're an employee of the university, but what you think the role of the university is in, furthering the causes that you talked about in your presentations. So if anybody wants to jump in on that, just, you're speaking to a room full of students, a lot of undergrad students, and if you think that there's, something people can do either at a university level or at a student level to support what you're talking about.
I mean, we work in classrooms, and that's just where everything that we do starts. And this is a sensitive subject that we work on, factory farming and animal agriculture, and food is a really sensitive subject. And so teachers that are willing to have this conversation and talk openly and honestly about where this part of our food system fits in, what it actually looks like in those realities. So students, if you have teachers that you think would benefit from a lesson, we can adopt our programming to almost any curriculum out there. Teachers, if you're willing to have us come in and have discussions and lessons with your students about this industry that so many of us don't know about. So this is everything for us, universities, high schools, it's everything. Awareness, I know it's so trite and oversaid, but if you're not aware of where we are and understand where we are, it's impossible to move forward. And I really resonated with like the how heavy all this stuff is, and our movement, God, there's so much burnout and there's so much heaviness, but so that I think there's a balance there somewhere of awareness and taking care of ourselves.
Okay. As in the area of recycling and diversion of materials and things like that, it actually it starts with kids in first and second grade a lot of times, because they're coming home and educating their parents on ways to properly recycle and divert things from the landfill. So education and recycling definitely coincide all the way. And then you get into the universities and you get green teams and you get people that are advocating for diverting more material and reuse and repair, because we don't do enough of that sometimes. And also, when I say reuse, like Goodwill, we have Goodwill boxes on our at most of our facilities, so people, when they come in to drop off their bottles and cans, if we have a buyback center, they can also bring in their clothing and things like that. And a lot of times campuses, you guys probably do the same thing, is we push for basically at the end of the school year to have a collection process where people can, they're not going to use it, don't throw it away, donate it, you know. So that's some of the areas for the recycling side.
At the mission statements of 100 different universities, they would all be pretty much the same. Education, research, and public service, right? And for any university, but specifically for a leading public university like we have here at UC San Diego, that idea of public service and education, I think, takes on a very unique role. And when we think about the education mission of a university, we often think about what goes on in the lecture hall, right? But I look at this as the public service component involves not just what we offer in our libraries and our theaters and other ways for the campus to, or the community to engage. It's about universities doing better, right, as major institutions. And in doing better, we can show a way to the public. And that's a kind of education that needs to happen beyond the four walls. And I think particularly in this moment at UC San Diego, as we have the arrival of the Blue Line, we are more public than we have ever been, and becoming more so every day. We are turning the university out. And I think there is a great opportunity in there, as we are striving to do better, to also then let the community experience that and learn from it, be inspired by it, and yes, challenge us to do even better. And through that, you know, we're able to have that sort of education of an entire community.
Yeah, if I could, thanks, Josh. If I could add to that in terms of public service, as someone that is working with environmental justice communities, I provide presentations to the classroom on a constant basis, and I know there's a lot of desire to learn, to experience, to be with communities at the front lines of the climate crisis. So we're constantly asked, can we volunteer? Can we volunteer? And our organization is a nonprofit organization. We don't have, unfortunately, we don't have the financial capacity to provide paid internships. So I'm constantly saying the institution, the part of the public service of the institution should definitely build within the structure an internship mechanism that is fully structured from the institution. So institution is providing funding to pay the internship, but also to provide mentorship to the interns. So you deploy the interns into organizations like ours, and we provide the learning, but the institution takes responsibility for paying the internship, but also providing the mentorship and like making sure you're supervising and making sure the intern is fulfilling the responsibilities. So I think that that's something really specific that students could take on and ask for academic services to include that as part of your academic experience. And then in terms of also what Josh was talking about when you explained the network of the transit system, what I automatically thought is the transit system that the university is deploying to electrify it it's an example of the universe, right? It's setting up a mini city. And that model is what we need to see in environmental justice communities. And EJ communities should be the first ones where we see all electric buses, a system, a network that works, solar in all our homes. That should be in our communities. And so the service goes into connecting and providing a model for what we could see in our communities. And it should be done in our communities first because we're at the front lines of the crisis. So all those toxic, like the biggest companies producing all the toxic stuff that you talked about are in our communities all throughout the United States. So if we address that, we're at the front lines of really addressing the issues.
Great question.
Thank you. I had a question. When you're doing individual sustainability work, how do you determine the allocation of like your focus and energy towards like individual aspects of sustainability, such as like having zero waste processes or focusing more on stewardship and psychological and mental effects of, eco-anxiety, for instance?
Well, I've gone through waves of this. I can just speak on my own experience. I think that there's a balance. I mean, it's pretty ineffective to be in like a mental health crisis in this for the sake of sustainability. If we're thinking about a more holistic way of understanding ourselves in the earth, right? If we are too burdened individually, then I think it's problematic. So we need to bring joy into our lives. We need to connect with community. We need to have, and this is why traditional indigenous knowledge is so important. And I was going to say with the previous question, I mean, universities everywhere are starting to go through a process of humility in terms of knowledge and whose knowledge and how we obtain knowledge and what kind of knowledge is prioritized in the academy. And so that is part of, I think, our health crisis, our mental health crisis. So I think it really needs to be balanced. Students tell me they're too stressed out at the grocery store. Like they're standing in the aisles like, what do I do? It all seems like it's, going to cause a problem, and there's waste, and this one's in plastic, and I thought it was organic, but it's covered in plastic, and we can only do what we can, We need to have joy too. And so I think the joy is really important, being in community. We've lost that joy for a few years of being able to share with people. And I think that is really important, and we do what we can with all of our individual sustainability behaviors. It's just such an overwhelming problem.
At the end of one of our lessons, we want students to feel empowered, and that's why I like to focus on individual actions. Hopefully it's not burdening them, but it's empowering them, knowing that when millions of individuals make different choices, that's when systems and cultures start to shift. Because without that individual change, systems don't change. And so my goal with focusing on what we can do as individuals is hopefully a sense of, yes, I'm not powerless. I don't have to wait for people in DC or wherever to do something, because they're probably not going to do the things that we need them to do in time. So what can we actually do as individuals to push things in the right way? And hopefully that brings about some joy and some motivation and excitement, because that's the way that it makes me feel, and I want to pass that on to students as well.
Other questions?
I have one question over here.
Yes, I'll run over here.
Thank you all. I'm a student in biology who hopes to study gene regulation because I see everything sort of through a lens of how the environment influences individual organisms, and so I think that's really motivating. But I think that it's really hard to sort of shift the populist lens in viewing the world as something that's impacting us, so our harm is actually coming back to us. How do you all sort of fight the stigmatisms within your different areas of specialization? Like, things aren't recycled. I've heard that on campus, you know, people don't really believe that it's being recycled, or reusable ware doesn't actually get cleaned, or you know, these farming isn't actually as bad as it may seem or may be made out to be, right? Electric vehicles actually use a lot of resources. Transportation, there's no hope because the infrastructure isn't built underground and such. And how can we sort of like work collaboratively to combat those? It's a lot of different things.
Well, I'll just say from the recycling side, and there's a lot of items out there. People would like to ban plastics or ban this or ban that. And I always basically go back to, sure, that's fine. Someday we may not have this as a product that's damaging the environment, but until that time comes, I'm gonna find outlets or basically take that product and make it into a resource that can be reused over and over again. So that's the part we're playing right now. And everything in your blue recycle bin is definitely being recycled and made into new products. It's the things that aren't supposed to be in there that end up in the landfill because they weren't supposed to be there in the first place.
I'd say from our little reusable operation, it's really making sure that we and everyone that works with us make sure that everything is completely clean when it's served to the customer and the word gets out there. And hopefully they feel better having a bottle of wine out of it than if we supplied a bottle with the same wine and the bottle went into the blue bin.
So for the communication piece, is it a lot of like just sort of word of mouth, or, you know, teaching, or how can we increase the output of our communication?
I'd say in our case, it's mainly been word of mouth. In the community, mainly. There's probably more we can do.
So I'm going to riff on the word of mouth for a moment, just because what if we were to extrapolate from a retail setting and move into the marketplace of ideas, right? What we're talking about then is advocacy. And to, you know, your question about sort of how do you keep the chin up and keep going, for me personally, it's one conversation at a time, right? And if I can have a connection with one person, have an impact with one person, that's energizing for me and helps me keep going. At the same time, that makes another advocate, right? And so that's how we create word of mouth within the marketplace of ideas and grow a movement.
Yeah, I could speak from a community-based organization. Is the stories that we put together are extremely transforming in telling the message, efficiently bringing people into the conversation, engaging and at a more regular language way, and so we're finding that storytelling has always been very, very transformative. And so just bringing back storytelling and creating opportunities for us to share our own experiences. But I think, transportation is one component of our work, but really what we're against or what we're trying to address is the issue of systematic racism. And unfortunately, that continues to be at the core of a lot of inequity, and a lot of, we go, through city council, the halls in Sacramento, and there's a lot of continue this belief that that's an issue that needs to be addressed. But that is not true, and so you focus on continuing to build, and you continue to build and organize, especially communities of color speaking for themselves. So you want to make sure that the folks that are telling the stories you're creating mechanisms for them to be at the decision-making point and for them to speak for themselves. And that's when it becomes authentic and it's more transformative and efficient.
Thank you. Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have for Q&A today. We'd like to once again thank our wonderful speakers for joining us as part of this year's Green Talks. Another round of applause for them, please.
Thank you.
At this time, I'd like to invite up Olivia Joseph, who's our interim direct chair of the Inter-Sustainability Council, who'll just be announcing the names of our art competition and raffle.
Hello, everyone. So today we have two different categories that we are announcing winners from. First, we have the sustainability vote, and the winner for that is Samantha Hoke. The second category we have is People's Choice, and the winner for that is Eugen Rowe. Okay. At the end of this, once we wrap up, please meet us at the SRC.
Thank you, and congratulations. With that, we're almost at the end of our Green Talks. We'd like to thank our speakers, of course, for joining us, thank our wonderful support staff who helped us set up the event, and one last thank you for our Green Talks team, who I'd like to invite up to the stage at this time. Maybe they can do a bow for the stage. Thank you to all of them for coming out and for all of our volunteers for helping to set up. None of this would have been possible without you. We're so excited that we were able to have a Green Talks in person for the first time in 2 years. Let's give all these awesome folks and all of you for coming out one big round of applause. With that concludes our Green Talks. We'd like to invite you to visit our website, which will be up on the screen. For more information about all of our upcoming events, speaker bios, ways to contact them if you have any burning or pressing questions or perhaps complaints. And with that, this concludes our Green Talks. Thank you all for attending, and thank you for being sustainable and choosing to spread the word.